Hello, and welcome to my increasing temporal discombobulation, for which this franchise ain't gonna help. So today I would like to talk about the Friday the 13th franchise, and if I can, if I dare, if I dream it, attempt to look at the timeline, the kill counts, and just kind of the overall plot, and some questions I have regarding some things that just don't make no damn sense. So, to give a little backstory on Friday the 13th, it was originally directed and produced by Sean S. Cunningham. It was written by Victor Miller, and it was acquired by Paramount, which is really important because this was the first independent slasher to be acquired by a major studio, meaning this got a little bit more of a budget, as well as, and most importantly, a widescreen theatrical release, which slashers in that era didn't really get, and they were making a lot of them post the success of Halloween. And even throughout the 80s, a lot of slashers just didn't have those big, wide theatrical releases. So I think one of the reasons this franchise is so well known and beloved is because it's the best. It's because it was the one that most people saw. And this is a ripoff of Halloween. The creators openly have admitted that throughout the years. It was. Also, the music was done by Harry Manfredini, and I do think that really impacts the film because it's such a great score. So let's just go ahead and get into this 1980 Long Night at Camp Blood. They were warned. They were doomed. And on Friday the 13th, nothing will save them. You may only see it once, but that will be enough. I love the tagline. Okay, so the film opens in a flashback in 1958, kind of like Halloween. So at the beginning, we see two camp counselors going off to, have a little makeout sesh, as you do. Anyway, they're interrupted and murdered, bringing our kill count thus far to 2. This causes Camp Crystal Lake to be shut down. All right, so then we hop to 21 years later, which seems like a long time, but all right. Okay, so now we're at June 13th, 1979. Steve Christie is trying to reopen Camp Crystal Lake, and he's hired a bunch of teenagers, 7 teenagers, to try to help him. I think what's important about this is Steve Christie owns Camp Crystal Lake. He grew up at Crystal Lake. His parents owned a resort there, and he and his family have been trying to open Crystal Lake for quite some time, throughout the 60s and 70s. In 62, I think they found that the water wasn't safe enough. There have been a lot of little arson attacks and so on and so forth. This is the first time in 21 years that they are really, really trying to open the camp back up. And our killer ain't having it. She murders a total of 7 people until she is decapitated by our survivor girl, Alice Hardy. All right, so why is our killer, Pamela Voorhees, doing it? Turns out, 22 years ago, 1957, her son Jason Voorhees drowned while no one at the camp, particularly the counselors, were paying attention. No one helped him. So he is dead canonically in the first movie. This will be retconned later. I believe Victor Miller said Jason was dead from the beginning. He was the victim, not the villain. The movie completely ends with a dream sequence inspired by Carrie. And I just want to throw out some dates retroactively now that we've talked about the first movie. So we know Pamela Voorhees was our killer. She was born in 1930 and she died June 13th, 1979. Jason's poor birthday. And I honestly would categorize this film as a good for her movie. And she got a total of 9 kills. We have Crazy Ralph, who's just this kind of old man who warns all the teenagers not to go to Camp Blood, aka Camp Crystal Lake, which a lot of these movies will have either Crazy Ralph or Crazy Ralph-esque character going forward. And here's the moral of the story. If an old dude at a gas station tells you to turn around and go back, turn around and go back. Always listen. There are a lot of horror movies that have used that, from the remake of The Hills Have Eyes, Urban Legend. I guess Children of the Corn used that too. I mean, a lot of horror movies have done this. And then I wanted to mention that Jason was born in 1946. He died in 1957 at 11 years old. I think some people get a little confused. Pamela was an employee at Crystal Lake and took Jason with her. So I don't know why she doesn't blame herself for Jason's death, but I guess that's neither here nor there. Obviously, this is retconned, and I have a lot of questions. So let's just move into part 2. Friday the 13th, part 2. The kill count continues. We're at August 1979, 2 months after the events of the first film. Adult Jason is apparently alive and well. I'm not sure that makes sense, and he's rocking a burlap sack from the town that dreaded sundown. Okay, I have questions. Like, what has he been doing the past 22 years? How did he survive? While his mom was wreaking havoc at Camp Crystal Lake throughout the years, setting things on fire and killing people, why did he not go to her? Did he not remember her? Or did he fake his death to get away from her? Was he raised by Crazy Ralph? I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure the retcon made sense, but I sure do love it. He kills the survivor girl from the previous film, Alice Hardy, and it brings his kill count to 1. Because, listen, she killed his mom. He had to get revenge. It's fine. But I have another question. Where did she live? And how did Jason get from Crystal Lake to her house and back? Like, did he walk? Did he hitchhike? I don't know. Anyway, so we know he's been living in, well, we find out he's been living in a shack in the woods, complete with a shrine to Mommy Dearest, including her severed head. The film jumps to 5 years ahead. So we're at July 1984. Keep in mind the movie came out in 1981, so we're already off to a really weird start in terms of the timeline. Paul Holt is opening a camp counseling training center called Packanack Lodge at Crystal Lake. So this is a different place that just so happens to be in the same lake. There are a lot of places at this lake. I wonder how big Crystal Lake is. And also, does it connect to the ocean? We'll find out later. So we have 38-year-old Jason Voorhees is like a legend, a literal like campfire story. Of course, we know he's real and taking a cue from Mommy and terrorizing the people at Crystal Lake. You notice he didn't start killing until he saw his mom die. I wonder if there's something going on there. Anyway, he killed 8 people and a dog in this movie before being stopped by Ginny Fields, who is masquerading as Pamela. I will say, as it pertains to this movie, it's just the same as the first movie, but with a tighter script and more fast-paced. So we can go ahead and move right along to Friday the 13th 3 in 3D, a new dimension in terror. Same slasher formula, but in 3D. Much like Jaws 3D, kind of blue. You know, just because it's the third film doesn't mean it needs to be in 3D, guys. It doesn't. But we do get that funky disco score, a lot more humor and self-awareness in it, which I do think elevates the material. So we're still in July 1984. The first film took place over like a Friday and a Saturday. This film is like Saturday, Sunday. So I guess they should have called it Saturday the 14th, but whatever. This picks up where part 2 left off, and Jason finally gets his hockey mask from the jokester that is Shelley. This Jason is probably my least favorite of all the Jason performances because it's kind of slow and sad, just kind of wandering about. The shots last too long, and it seems like the actor just didn't really know like what to be doing while he's walking from point A to point B, and it didn't need to be in the movie. So this time we're following like more townsfolk, a trio of bikers and some friends vacationing at Higgins Lodge, which is Higgins family's summer house, I guess. I don't know, it's some rich people shit. I don't get it. Anyway, Jason is wandering about and he kills 12 people until he's stopped by Chris until the next day, because I guess he heals real fast. And once again, we end on a weird, nonsensical dreaming sequence because Carrie was a big hit and I wish they'd stop doing it. Moving on to Friday the 13th, part 4, the final chapter. Final? Alright. So, Jason still haunts you. You're not alone. I do think the opening shot's like really impressive, like tracking. Like it starts with a helicopter and the camera follows it down to the ground and then goes through kind of the street up the driveway into the barn where Jason is dead. All right, we're still in July 1984. This is a very long week. This movie's like Monday, Tuesday. So Tuesday the 17th. All right. So the third film in a row taking place in July of 1984. Again, very long week. So the fourth installment picks up where part 3 left off. So Jason has been axed in the head by Chris, which leaves that little dent in his hockey mask. So they do keep in there for quite a few installments going forward. And he's assumed dead and he's taken to the hospital. Girl. Of course, he's not dead. He leaves. He goes on his killing spree at Crystal Lake. You would think that the police would have more of the area quarantined off, you know, because this man is like, he's killed what? How many people so far in July 4th? 12 plus 8. 20 people, and they don't like have a manhunt going after him. They don't have a police at the morgue making sure he's dead. Damn, these cops suck. Okay, so Jason kills another 13 people this week. I think what's really noticeable is the introduction of the Jarvis family. Rob Deere, who is one of our hot brunette bland love interests in this franchise, of which there are many. He's the brother of Sandra, who was one of the girls killed in part 2, you know, like 2 days ago. And he somehow got there, or got notified, arrived there, and has been looking for Jason for like 2 days. But it makes it seem like he's been there for a while, because I think they weren't paying attention to the timeline. But whatever, neither here nor there. Jason is killed by Tommy Jarvis, aka Tom Savini. This kid is basically supposed to be Tom Savini, and I think that's really funny because he did do the makeup for the first film and for this film. 12-year-old Tommy, who's played by Corey Feldman, and his sister Trish survived the film and the long AF weekend at Camp Blood. Very long. Dear God, we can get out of 1984 now. Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning, which actually came out in 1984, but takes place in 1989. That makes sense, I guess. So it's 5 years after Part 4. We're continuing on our Tommy Jarvis adventure. He's now like 17 or so, and he's been in a psychiatric hospital for the past 5 years. We know, of course, his mom was murdered in the last film, and it's mentioned that her parents had been divorced, so I guess the dad just did not remain in the picture. I don't know what happened to the sister, but he's a ward of the state. I guess, side note, it's the state of New Jersey, so Crystal Lake's in New Jersey. That's kind of important later, but I get it. So Tommy is sent to Pinehurst Halfway House, which is at Crystal Lake, and a lot of bad stuff happens. Spoilers, Jason, once again, is not the killer. And I do think it's important to note here that Tommy is still making his monster masks, so I like that continuation from the first film in terms of his hobbies. He's a lot more quiet and reserved and very intense. But on a cool note, he's learned to become a really good fighter. One of the teenagers that lives at Pinehurst is Vic. He's very intense and moody, and he kills the very annoying chocolate-loving Joey Burns. So I guess 1 kill for Vic. He's arrested, and some paramedics come to take poor Joey away, one of whom is Roy Burns. We're going to learn that he is the father of Joey, which kind of doesn't make sense because it's a long story.
Like, they said he doesn't have family, but then we find out he does, and they live in the same town, but they don't know that they're related, but they have the same name, and he knows who he is, but Joey didn't know who he was? I don't know. It's confusing to me. Anyway,
Roy Burns, the paramedic father, pulls a Pamela and starts killing people because his son was murdered. He gets a total of 17. I guess good for him, before he's killed by the combination of our 3 survivors, Reggie Winter, Pam Roberts, and with a little help from Tommy Jarvis. Kinda. And poor Tommy's driven into further madness, and he picks up the hockey mask, and we get basically what is Jamie Lloyd in the ending of Halloween 4. And just like in the ending of Halloween 4, it's a fake out. This movie, I think, is kind of fun. We have the backwards, kind of gross, inbred family. They're not actually. The Hubbards, they're kind of annoying, and a lot of people like them, a lot of people don't. Totally get either way. We get introduced to the mayor of Crystal Lake, which I think is kind of fun. A little kind of ode to Jaws. But overall, the movie feels kind of cheap and sleazy, but I do like it, and Jason isn't the killer. I don't know. I think it's fun. Moving on to the best film in the Friday franchise, I Will Die on This Hill, Part 6, Jason Lives. Yes, that's right. I believe this takes place a year after the previous film, which puts it in around 1990, despite the fact that it came out in 1986, but whatever. Continuing again with our Tommy Jarvis timeline, he is, I guess, 18 now. It's so confusing. So he's escaped the institution he was being held at, and he goes to Jason's gravesite. Why will say, you know, in this one, he's a lot more talkative. He's very paranoid. He's got a lot of energy and enthusiasm. So whatever hospital he was staying at this time, he was clearly getting better treatment. It's almost like he's a whole new person. So Jason was dead. Tommy had successfully killed him at age 12, 6 years ago. And then he pulls a 1931 Frankenstein and resurrects him via a metal rod and some lightning. Because Jason is a teenage Frankenstein. On a more serious note, most fans call him Zombie Jason going forward. I don't know why he was buried with the mask. Neither here nor there. Okay, so at this point, even though he's only been dead for 6 years, Jason has become like an urban legend once again. Again, only gone for 6 years, but okay. So we find that Crystal Lake has been renamed Forest Green, and the camp has actually been open. And this is the first time we actually see the camp fully open with kids in it. And I actually think the kids are a really fun addition. This could have become really annoying, but I think the hijinks and kind of comedy that they add to it was really fun. And I like seeing the teenagers being kind of nice and not assholes and being cool counselors. Like, they should have done that more instead of where they're going to go after this. One of the little girls is reading Huit Clous de Jean Passart, which is so funny. If you're unfamiliar, this is a story about two women and a man who are stuck in a room in hell together, and it's a lot of drama and stuff. And one of them remarks that they realize now what hell is. Hell is other people. So it kind of made me wonder, is this Jason's hell? Did Tommy really kill him? He was never resurrected, and he's just been stuck living in his purgatory this whole time? That would be interesting. Probably not, but it's fun to think about. Anyway, moving on. So Jason is, killing more teenagers and some paintballers and some more townspeople. He ends up with a total kill count of 18 this time around. We meet Sheriff Garris. I believe his name is Mike Garris, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be kind of an ode to Mick Garris, who is a practical effects artist. This sheriff is so aggressive and trigger happy, I really don't like him, but we do see that he is trying really hard to ensure the safety of the people in town, which I like. So anyway, I think overall my like of him negates my dislike, and he comes out a little neutral. Tommy defeats Jason because that's kind of what has to happen, and he does so with the aid of the sheriff's daughter, Megan, because we gotta have a female survivor. This is a horror movie after all. They chain Jason to a heavy rock at the bottom of Crystal Lake because I guess you have to kill him the way he originally died, but he didn't even originally die, so I just feel like that's very confusing. In two ways, the ending of the film shows that he's actually still kind of alive, and I've just been theorizing, right? So like, Tommy Jarvis, what if he becomes the next Crazy Ralph? Or what if he's in a time loop and he's always been Crazy Ralph? Because this film, he's really acting like Crazy Ralph. This is definitely my favorite of the franchise. We have 3 really great Alice Cooper songs. Man Behind the Mask, which is generally considered like the theme of Friday the 13th, and Teenage Frankenstein, which I referenced earlier. The Graveyard Attendant, it kind of mocks horror fans, and we see there's a lot of like self-referential humor in here that gets a little kind of meta. Like this one woman says, "I've seen enough horror movies to know any weirdo wearing a mask is never friendly." True, girl. You see someone wearing a mask, you drive away, and I like that they tried to. This film is also the only film in the franchise that doesn't have any nudity, and I think that's because of the kids on the set, maybe. But I think that this is just the best made, had the best characters, the best music, does not have the best kills. That's coming up. But overall, yeah, I think this is the most fun the franchise got. Not the most weird, the most fun. Moving on to weird, Friday the 13th, Part 7, New Blood. He has met his match. This came out in 1988, but predominantly takes place in 97. I'll explain. So this film, we're following Tina Shepard. I guess we're ditching Tommy Jarvis, which is kind of unfortunate. So Tina has godlike powers. She's telekinetic, so she can like move things with her mind. She seems to be slightly precognitive, so she can kind of see the future. This is clearly a post-Nightmare on Elm Street film. It opens in 1990 with 7-year-old Tina Overhearing her parents arguing, her father is clearly an abusive alcoholic, and she accidentally kills him by causing a wooden boat dock to collapse on him at Crystal Lake. So 7 years have passed, and she's under the care of Dr. Cruz, who is Bernie from Weekend at Bernie's, and she lives with her mother, and they are returning to Crystal Lake for the first time in 7 years, which puts the film in 1997. I guess this is supposed to be like a form of therapy for her. Kind of. Sort of. Dr. Cruz is evil, but he's always evil. So, moving forward. In this film, we see Tina try to use her awesome powers to resurrect her dead father, but she accidentally resurrects Jason instead. One might say he's back, the man behind the mask, and he's out of control. So Tina really pulled a Tommy. Way to go, Tina. So Jason spares her and goes off to kill 15 other people, and it makes me have to ask, why do so many people have machetes? Anyway, this film I think does have a lot of really great kills in it. I think it has some of the more fun ones, with the one woman getting like banged up against a tree in her sleeping bag, and then we have Melissa who gets like axed in the head, and then Jason picks her up and literally chucks her across the room into a TV. This is the first time we have Kane Hodder playing Jason. He is the most famous for playing Jason, and he played him for the most films. He eventually will be replaced when we start getting to Freddy vs. Jason. Alright, so Tina and Jason battle, and it is epic. It's so fun. Kane Hodder, one of the reasons he's such a fan favorite is because this dude is willing to take a beating for a movie. And he does. He's electrocuted. He goes through a window. Although Jason does go through windows quite a lot. That's kind of like once a movie, Jason be jumping through a window. A roof collapses on him. He falls through the stairs. His mask crushes his face. He's hung. He has nails shot at him. He's lit on fire in a very long pyrotechnic stunts. I don't think I worded that well. You get what I'm saying. The house literally blows up, and I think they literally blew the house up. It was a really intense and really great shot, which they likely only got to take once, and I would say they did a good job. Thank God the camera didn't get fucked up while they were doing that. So yeah, Tina beats the crap out of Jason, but he still comes after her. She does kind of win though, by reviving her decade-long dead father and having him drag Jason back into Crystal Lake. Way to go, zombie dad. Part 8, the last of the Friday the 13th proper films. We're on to 1998. Jason Takes Manhattan. Okay, so Jason is at the bottom of Crystal Lake. There's a boat driving. I don't know nautical terms. So there's a boat sailing. That seems right. And its anchor is down, and it hits this big, thick electrical cord at the bottom of the lake, and it causes that to be dragged to Jason and electrocutes the chain that he's attached to, which causes him to resurrect again. Like a reverse Jaws 2 or something. So Jason climbs aboard the boat and he kills the 2 people on that boat. Then he sails that ship. Okay, he sails that ship. He docks and boards another ship, the Lazarus, which is full of Lakeview High School graduates. And they are sailing from New Jersey to New York. So I guess apparently Crystal Lake does have like a outlet connected to the ocean or something. Okay, never saw that in any of the scenes. And across 2 boats and in Manhattan, Jason gets a kill count of 18 people or so. Those are on-screen kills. I think clearly he killed everyone on the boat, and there were more than the people that we saw getting killed on screen. There were a lot of extras and stuff, so clearly the kill count would be higher, but in terms of on-screen kills, I counted 18 bodies. Okay, he sinks the boat, the Lazarus. There are 5 people who survive and get on board one of those little, like, floaty life raft thingies and float to Manhattan. Meanwhile, Jason swims? Wait. What? Jason Voorhees, the kid who drown. The guy who keeps getting drowned and chained up at the bottom of Crystal Lake. He can swim? Since literally when? When did this dude become an Olympic champion Michael Phelps fucking swimmer that he can go from where that boat was all the way to the dock in New York? That is a long distance. And, I mean, not to be negative on Kane Hodder, but he's known for the heavy breathing. You're telling me this asthmatic fool has enough lung capacity to swim that far? Does he even need to breathe? I have so many questions. That scene just pissed me off so much. So anyway, I guess, moving on. The Manhattan portion of the film covers about 20 minutes of the runtime. This title really should have been Jason's Sails to Manhattan, but that's not a reference to the Muppets. He continues to stalk the 5 survivors, kick a boombox, and it ends in Jason being defeated by some toxic waste, which apparently floods the cities of New York sewer system every night at midnight. You know, New York stuff, I guess. Before the toxic avengers him, we hear Jason say, "Mommy?" in a child's voice, vomit water, and then get covered with toxic waste. And then he reverts to a child. I don't even... Drugs. I'm hoping this movie was made by drugs. We do see Jason as a child throughout the film, none of which makes sense. And also the makeup keeps changing and was not good. I'm very confused by this whole movie. There is narration in it at the beginning, which is strange because none of the other movies do it. Every scene was too long, which didn't build suspense or tension. The dialogue was trash. The characters are trash. The kills suck. The MPA was historically really harsh in all of these movies. So they should have counterbalanced that with, like, you know, good scripts. I don't know. This movie has never heard of continuity. There is a really cool, like, Jason standing in Manhattan shot, but, like, that's really all this movie has going for it. Alright, we're on to the 9th film, which is entitled Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. You gotta stop saying these movies are the final ones, because they never are. The film came out in 1993. This is where Friday the 13th films were purchased by New Line Cinema, the house that Freddy built. And boy, did they not like Jason very much. They really dropped the ball. And the mask. So, the New Line Cinema films include Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, Jason X, Freddy vs. Jason, and I think they still did the remake, but I'm not sure. Right, so this film takes place the summer of 2003, and it came out in 93. Did I mention the timeline was wonky? Because it is. Alright, so Jason, at some point between 1998 and 2003, has since returned from Manhattan to Crystal Lake in New Jersey. He's an adult again, with no explanation, and alive again with no explanation. Maybe the toxic waste gave him powers. Anyway, so he's captured by the FBI and blown up, I think. He goes to his body is transported to the hospital where the coroner eats his still bleeding black heart, which allows Jason to possess him and other people by turning into a gross slug thing. I don't know. People are killed. We learn Jason has a half-sister, Diana, because that makes sense. Most people would assume that she is the daughter of Jason's father, Elias. However, the writer-director asserts that she is Pamela's daughter. Which, okay, side note. So, Pamela, canonically, was born in 1930. Jason was born in 1946, meaning she had him when she was 16. And, listen, I just always kind of assumed that Jason was the result of Pamela and an older adult male relative. Maybe that's wrong to do so, but that's just always kind of what I thought until I read all this information about it. So I guess Pamela was technically married to someone, I'm assuming high school sweetheart, who at some point left, I guess. So I don't know who Diana's father is or why, Pamela gave her up or anything like that. I'm assuming Diana would have to be younger than Jason. Diana herself has a daughter, Jessica, who herself has a daughter, Stephanie, with Steve Freeman. Steve was supposed to be Tommy Jarvis, but New Line did not get the rights to use Tommy Jarvis, so he's a new character. I do think it would have been better if he was Tommy. Also, I hate Steve and Jessica, Diana, and everyone in this movie except for Creighton Duke. We'll get to him in a minute. This kill count has about 21 people. Kind of hard to tell. There's a little guesswork there. Okay, Survivor Girl Jessica uses a mystical dagger. Okay, yep, checking notes. That's what it says. Mystical dagger to stab and kill Jason. We learn through Stephen Williams, who plays Creighton Duke, the bounty hunter, who's awesome, that only through a Voorhees can he be reborn, and only through a Voorhees can he be killed. Where was that throughout the previous 9 movies, or the next couple? Whatever, guess we just threw that in one and dropped it. After we see Jason's mask being grabbed by Freddy Krueger's from the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, clawed, glove, and being dragged. So I guess that's how he goes to hell. Why would they say Jason goes to hell when that's like an end credit scene? And he took Manhattan when that's like 20 minutes. They're really bad titles. Whatever. Yeah. I feel like this is a metaphor for New Line destroying Jason. So now we can move on to this gets confusing. So it's the 10th film in the canon chronological timeline. However, in terms of like how the movies were released, this is the 11th film. So Freddy vs. Jason is the 10th film in canon timeline order, which also takes place in 2003, a couple months after the events of Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday. All right, I think. Because this is a New Line film, of course, Freddy gets top billing in Freddy vs. Jason. So over the course of a few years, the children of Springfield have forgotten Freddy. So Freddy drags Jason to hell, I guess. Is that what that was supposed to be in the movie at the end? I don't know. So he enters Jason's dream and somehow revives him, I guess. And like, when did Freddy get the power to do that? And why hasn't he been using it to resurrect the OG Nightmare on Elm Street kids and re-kill them for shits and giggles? Like, that feels like that's right up a Freddy alley. Anyway, so Jason is more of a victim in this film to Freddy's kind of manipulative, predatory behavior, which I feel like tracks for those two characters, although Jason gets significantly more kills. Alright, so Jason somehow travels from New Jersey to Ohio, which is like 500 miles. It's like a 7-hour car trip. I really hope he hitchhiked. So this is like the movie where the kids think they're in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, but they're actually in a Friday the 13th movie. Oops. So Mark and Will are patients at Weston Hills Psychiatric Hospital, which we see in Dream Warriors, which is the third Nightmare on Elm Street film. Jason gets the kids of Springwood to remember Freddy, kind of, by accident. I guess he's lucky. That weekend, Will and Mark escaped. Maybe Freddy helped them. Who knows? Who's to say? Yeah, I don't know. The movie's kind of confusing. The stoner Freeburg ends up getting possessed by Freddy, who enters him as a giant caterpillar, which seemed like it's inspired by Alice in Wonderland, but also could just be inspired by Jason Goes to Hell. I don't know what that was. It was very strange. Anyway, so the kids figure out that they're dealing with Jason, not Freddy, and then they drive a drugged Jason back from Ohio to New Jersey, again, like a 7-hour car trip, so that they could have like a Godzilla versus King Kong kaiju battle at Crystal Lake, because they want Jason to have like home territory. I don't know. Neither of them win or lose. Will and Lori survive. Jason kills 18 people. Freddy only gets 3. That concludes that. Moving on to Jason X, which is the 10th film released, but it is the 11th film that takes place in the canonical timeline. When does this movie take place? Girl, I don't know. It opens in 2008, where Jason is captured by the government and taken to Camp Crystal Lake Research Facility, where he is studied by David Cronenberg. Not kidding, that's actually David Cronenberg. Then in 2010, Jason is cryogenically frozen after killing 7 people at the research facility, and another woman, Rowan, is cryogenically frozen, I guess, beside him. Yeah, this movie is weird. Then it cuts to 2455. And this is where we get Jason in space with his mask for some reason. It's a very campy movie. So this dude, Peter Lowe, and some students find Jason on the desert wasteland that is Earth and take him and Rowan aboard their ship, the Grendel. Jason kills a bunch of people, plays some VR games. He battles a sex robot who kills him, but through a computer thingy revives him and gives him synthetic upgrades, so he basically becomes Cyborg Jason. Another ship arrives to rescue the survivors of the Grendel, and I think there's 2 or 3, and then this guy, like, alien to, like, ships them out into the vacuum of space, and Jason goes flying back to Earth and lands in Crystal Lake. I guess. I don't know. I also don't know what the kill count is for this movie. It's a little confusing. So it is said on screen, so canonically, he has nearly 200 kills. I count 145 Jason kills, 100 men and 45.5 women, because one was pregnant. This movie's kill count, hard to tell, because there are 14 people killed on screen that I noticed that weren't VR people. But the ship hits Solaris, which is a space station, causing it to explode. And I don't know how many people were on the space station, so it's hard to tell how many people died there. So I only counted on-screen real kills. Very confusing. This is the end of Jason. This is his final foray. That is how it ends in 2455 in Crystal Lake with a cyborg hockey mask. Jesus. Okay, then we can get to the Friday the 13th, 2009 remake. Okay, takes place in 2009 and was released in 2009. Huge bonus point for taking place the year it was released in. That's literally never happened in this franchise before. Wow. So it was made by a lot of the same crew that made the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, and it feels like it. It also really feels like a 2009 gritty remake, which a lot of 80 horror movies were getting in that time period. Okay, so timeline-wise, 1979, Jason drowns. Cool, followed. 1980, Pamela Voorhees gets her revenge, and then she's decapitated with Jason witnesses. Followed. 29 years later, we have 2 segments. So the opening segment, a group of people come out, they're going camping. Jason kills everyone except for one woman, Whitney Miller. Okay, then it cuts to 6 weeks later. So what's important to note about this movie is that it's kind of a remake that combines the first 4 films. So we see Jason die, Pamela becomes a killer, gets decapitated, and Jason goes from burlap sack to hockey mask, which is the iconic visual representation of this film franchise. So I understand, like, that's what they wanted to get to, and it makes sense to kind of combine these movies. However, I was watching with someone who'd never seen it before, and she thought it was a direct sequel to Friday the 13th Part 1, because that was the only other movie she'd seen. And honestly, if you ignore some date changes, this does kind of track if you watch just Pamela killing and then pick up with the beginning, Pamela getting killed, where that movie ended, and then you pick up with Jason. It does kind of work, again, if you just ignore the dates. So that's a fun way to watch it. Anyway, back to 6 weeks later. Another group of friends come to Crystal Lake to stay at one of their friends, Trent's, again, I guess, summer house. I don't know how rich people do it. Whitney's brother, meanwhile, has come, Clay, who's basically Rob Deere from Part 4, and he's looking for his sister, and everyone in town is kind of a dick to him. Because reasons? Like, I don't get that, but whatever. Clay seemingly kills Jason and saves his sister, and I think they survive at the end, and that's supposed to be a dream sequence, but maybe it wasn't, and Jason survived and killed them. Up for interpretation. I count 13 kills, not including Pamela, in this movie. If you want to include Pamela, it's 14. I generally don't include the killer in my killed count. But I do think it's fun that we see Derek Mears playing Jason versus Jared Padalecki, because they're both like 6'5", 6'6" monsters, and it's just essentially a kaiju battle again. I really liked the Lawrence Chewy friendship. Most of the characters were pretty unlikable in this movie, but I thought they were pretty fun, and I enjoyed them quite a bit. I thought combining the first 4 films was a really great way to tell this story and kind of truncate a lot of the same that was this franchise. And I like that they made Jason this very fast, very smart, capable person. And did I mention fast? Because dude was hauling ass. The total kill count's a little hard to do. So just Jason kills on screen that I can visually see this person is dead and count them as a kill. I personally counted 145.5. Again, the 0.5 comes because one of the women in part 2 is pregnant. So this is, the 145 is the canonical timeline, not including the remake. If we include the remake, so adding the 13 kills, it's 158.5 Jason kills. 109 men, 49.5 women. Okay, if we count all kills, so we're including, not including killers. I don't include Jason kills. I don't include Pamela kills. I don't include Roy Barnes kills. Okay, so but I do include the people they killed. I don't include their deaths. So that's 193.5 kills. 132 men, 61.5 women. Okay, yeah. And then kind of the last thing I want to say is that ultimately I find the messaging for the Friday the 13th franchise to be superior than that of Halloween's. Even though Halloween is one of my favorite films of all time, Halloween does have a very negative messaging regarding mental health. And I find it's really stigmatizing mental illness, which does have real world negative consequences, because a lot of people take that kind of trope of the man who has escaped a mental institution is killing, teenagers as something that is plausible when, has that even ever happened? Comparatively, Friday the 13th is about a man who is differently abled and seemingly nonverbal, which many people kind of equate with a lack of intelligence. But Jason is smart, he is capable, and he isn't killing because he's different. He isn't killing because he's unwell. He's killing because you pissed him off and killed his mom. And honestly, good for her. I think he and Angela Baker from Camp Sleepaway would get I think he and Angela Baker from Camp Sleepaway would get along really well. Camp horror, superiority. Thanks for watching. I don't know why you did. Blah, 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 blah. Leave a comment. What are your thoughts on the Friday the 13th? If you have any Friday the 13th theories or, things you are confused about too, let me know. I'm curious. It's a weird franchise.